Hello and welcome to Fixing the Optical Problem, where we are trying to not contribute to the optical problem. I'm Zach Kastner, ABOC, owner of Shorewood Opticians in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and your resident sloptician. Joined as ever by Matthew Smith, otherwise known as That Glasses Guy, and owner of That Glasses Guy Optique. And we've got a special guest today, Mr. Badass himself, who needs no introductions. That's true. Speaking of making it weirder, Scott, talk dirty to me about single vision lenses.
Talk dirty?
Just about single vision lenses. Like, let's get nitty gritty on single vision lenses.
Did you say
I feel like
me about single vision lenses?
What did you just say?
I thought you said talk dirty to me about single vision lenses.
I did.
Okay. Whoa.
No, so Matt and I were talking about it before you got on, and it seemed everyone talks about progressives. That's all everyone cares about. Progressive this, progressive that. Progressives make the world go round. But such a huge market segment is single vision still. So, conventional, cast, aspheric, digital, atoric, these are all buzzwords that are thrown around constantly. And I would say even up until a couple of years ago, I didn't even know what the difference between any of these were. I just figured that they were marketing buzzwords. And there are some differences, but talk through it, especially from the lab side.
Oh, man. From the technical side, I mean, stock finished lenses are fine depending on power. So the more power, especially the more cylinder or plus on minus power, introduces more errors in the lens and in the fitting. However, a lot of these errors that freeform lenses claim to fix are irrelevant. They're not perceptible to the human eye. And the other issue with freeform lenses that nobody talks about much is that the quality of the surface is a big deal. And quality of surface is achieved in a lab that monitors their surface quality on a weekly basis and makes adjustments accordingly. Most production labs, you're lucky if they check it every 3 months. So this idea that you could compare apples to apples, so Brand A's lens that you get in today compared to Brand A's lens in 3 weeks may be two very different wearing experiences. And when you do take a machine that is not really dialed in, it's good enough, the power reads right, so you pass it, and you dial it in, and then you make a new lens, especially for someone who needs it, like a +6, -2 at 45, and they put on the in pair, they will tell you, oh my God, what a difference. So lens quality and surface quality is really a big deal. It's if you are using a lab that produces way too many pairs in between calibrations, it really is a bigger deal than the lens design you're using. It's like, you could buy a really expensive tire that's worn down and barely has any threads left on it. Or you could buy a cheap tire that's brand new, which is going to be better. And that's the piece of it that large manufacturers, they don't talk about it. They don't want to deal with it. I don't even think they care.
Surface quality is huge, and that's in all types of lenses, not just single vision. But that's a great point that I wasn't even thinking about bringing up today. So thank you for talking about that.
So a stock finished lens should have, in theory, better quality as long as the molds aren't worn out. Then you said aspheric is the next level up. And an aspheric lens is typically made from a glass mold that was made from a freeform machine, because that's why freeform machines were invented to begin with. So you're already getting a lens surface that's been calculated to be optimal over an average fit, if that makes sense. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, because there's a company that's going to be pushing out a freeform cast lens, is how they're marketing it in the next couple of months here.
Really?
Yeah, seriously, I kid you not. They've been
freeform cast for 30 years.
I'm just, it's making me laugh because, these are things that I've known, and I just, they get pushed to the back of the brain because whatever.
That's nice, right?
It is. It's a cast. It is a stock freeform lens.
Yeah.
And I did just give my rep the blank stare when he came in. And I really like him. He's a great guy. But I was just like, really?
Freeform technology was developed to make molds, glass molds for, or actually, I guess metal molds. You could do that too, but for stock finished blanks or semi-finished blanks, and that included progressives. Before that, they were. I don't even want to go into how old. That's way old. That's like Barry Santini old.
Barry does listen to this podcast, just so
I,
you're aware.
well, I wanted to get him in there because the secret is he loves the attention. Anyway, it doesn't matter. He loves the attention. So, Barry likes to sit next to the third rail. He doesn't want to touch it. He just wants to sit right next to it. That's Barry. Anyway, so now that you know that, you own him. So anyway, no. So let's see. Back to where we're going. So freeform lenses were surfaced. The surface of the glass was made on a freeform generator, and that freeform surface was then made into a stock finished lens. That glass mold was used to mold the front of a progressive, or the front of a single vision lens, or the front and back of an aspheric lens. So I guess they're just rebranding or remarketing how the lenses were already made.
Now, with cast lenses, typically a cast lens will be thinner than a surfaced lens.
Correct. Although there are some people that are saying, no, they can get them darn close. And the difference is that, I mean, a lot of people don't know because of previous marketing from big companies that, a half of a millimeter on the center of, say, a minus lens, in terms of the final cosmetic look, it's really neither here nor there. A 1.0 center versus a 1.2 versus a 1.4, we're talking about a fingernail out at the edge, maybe 2 fingernails different. So, in theory, stock finished are thinner because you can control the manufacturing process much, much closer. Freeform lenses can be very thin. A lot of big companies, again, they don't calibrate, they don't pay attention to this stuff, and they don't do that.
While we're on the calibration there, I want to just throw in there, does lens material have any bearing and effect on this? I know you know a lot more about the production side than I do, but what about labs that are running a bunch of different materials throughout the day? How is that affecting the final lens surface based on the calibrations that they're running?
Ooh, help me dial in that question. So basically, so are you're asking per lens material. So say one lens is
Right.
one material, the lens is another material. Does that affect manufacturing?
Right. Yeah. Does that affect our final lens surface quality just based on how the surfacing machine is calibrated?
I'm going to say yes, but here it's not a huge factor. When Trivex first came out, surfacing started to have to be done. Okay, so obviously there are different effects. When your lab equipment, it's the same for edging. If you guys run edgers, Trivex poly are going to wear out your wheels faster than plastics. And that goes the same for blade cutting edgers as well. The blade will get dull faster. So on that respect, if a lab is running a lot of poly and Trivex through surface, their machines are going to wear more and their parts are going to wear more. Does that answer your question?
I was directed at you, Matt.
Yeah, I think so.
Anyways, going back to that original single vision question, what about aspheric versus atoric?
It's kind of a fancy delineation. Most aspheric lenses now on the market, I think, are also atoric, and they just didn't change the label. Atoric just means that they're blend. I'm going to use some very imprecise words. They're blending.
Good.
They're blending the cylinder power a little bit to maximize vision in the visual field and the 30 degrees of rotation that your eye looks through and they're moving the cylinder. They're doing that by doing a trade-off between the peripheral and the direct line of sight, if that makes sense.
It does. So that's more of a vision quality thing rather than aspheric. I feel like is a lot of times a cosmetic quality difference.
So aspheric lenses should not be cosmetically different. So asphericity is actually part of the design of the lens that achieves a certain power. Back in the day, one of the first mass-marketed aspheric lenses was called Spectralite. It was 154 plastic, and they were all automatically aspheric no matter what you ordered. And they tended to be very curved. So if you ordered a +4 in Spectralite, you were going to get an 8 base.
Wow.
Ish. Someone will call me out on that. They'll go back and look. We have all that in our computer. Like if somebody has an old Spectralite on the shelf, we could run it. And you know, that's in there. So somebody will go, oh, it's a 7 base or whatever. It doesn't matter. The computer picked really high base curves for for Spectralite. So I tend to think of aspheric lenses as having a fitting button or fitting bubble. And that was a Seiko marketing thing that they still use. And in that 10 millimeter circle, the fitting button is an aspheric design or a toric design that is optimized for slightly better vision. I mean, that's generally how I think about it.
That's a good good little segue. Good little thought on that. Matt, anything to add in before I go with the rest of the list?
Oh,
no,
no,
not
we're almost there.
I always think it's interesting when we get into comparing visual acuity
bored right
versus
now.
comfort
Oh,
of
they're
vision.
dying.
I don't think people are dying, Scott. It's always interesting having you on. There's always little tidbits that we get out of this that traditional mentors and textbooks could never teach you. So I always appreciate having you here.
Fun stuff.
Allegedly fun stuff. Depends on who you're asking.
It's the nerd show today.
Well,
that I will take full credit for. Absolutely. What frames are you wearing today, Scott?
I'm wearing a frame I made. I mean, I made it. What do you want?
well, that just happened.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, so it's actually the B30,000. No, B30,000, and it was
one of those laying around here actually.
This frame. So back in the day, I made these about 4 or 5 years ago. Lafont had a habit of making really good quality bread and butter frames, and this one was called the Gentleman, and it fit me. And Lafont has a bad habit of, even if they have a frame that blows out, they'll stop making it. And that's kind of a higher end thing to do. And so they stopped making this, and I went, well, God, I love wearing that thing. And even though I don't really love it anymore because I'm tired of it, I decided to make it. So I made these. There.
I thought I was.
Instead of what frame am I wearing, that's the story of the frame I'm wearing.
Even better, even better. Because we were going to segue here into frame construction. Because you see lots and lots of frames, and you see some very, very high-end frames. And I'm assuming you also see some very low-end frames. You know, talk about the touch difference, the hinge difference, even just the quality of plastic or metal difference, if there even is any. I mean, Matt and I have our own opinions on this, but I want to hear from you.
Well, one of the things that's confusing, it's one of those things where you have to just know stuff, because people that market their product as high-end with sticking a high price on it, they're not selling a high-end. I mean, it's clearly cost-cutting to the max, and that's it's always been kind of common in our industry. So just because there's something in economics class, I'm sorry, I told you nerd time. It's called. This is something you can Google, and it actually applies to optical retail. But when you're selling a good, and in this case, our good is eyeglasses, there's something called an inferior good and a superior good. An inferior or a superior good is a good that it's this concept that let's just put it this way. You guys can look it up, but it's a concept that if you raise the price on something, it makes it more desirable. So there is kind of a sleight of hand in optical where they'll raise the price on a certain pair of glasses and it'll kind of get a high-end reputation. Maybe they'll market it that way, but then when you get it in your hands, it's cheesy.
Yep.
So that's probably that's the norm. Actually, that's a norm in our industry. I'm not saying everybody does that. There's a lot of people that don't, but there's enough people doing it where it's kind of normal.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it even at Expo this year. There was a brand I really was hoping to be wowed by, but I actually got my hands on it and was like, oh, this is awful. Like, I can see the weld here. And this is like a $700 retail frame. And you could visibly see the weld points on this high-end gold collection. I just wanted to die inside. I was like, this is interesting to me. But
interesting.
I remember that.
The solder points on a metal are really important, or the welds, and how well they hold up is a big deal.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
How about different plastics? Because you see lots of different acetates, and I'm assuming you also see lots of nylons and what's the PMMA or whatever, and TR90. Just
so TR90 is kind of interesting. It's a super cheap injected polycarbonate, basically. And what's interesting about it is in Korea is primarily where it's made. There's some made in Taiwan, but the finish quality on that has gone way up. So the finish, even though they weigh nothing, they're cheesy, they cost 99 cents to make or $2 to make or whatever. The finish on them is permanent usually, and it looks really, really good, really vivid. Oops, just lost my life. But that's, I guess, I don't know. You asked me about TR90. There's injected acetate and block stock acetate, and extruded acetate. And oops, people don't know I'm closed today. Stop ringing in 3 rings. The difference in how they're manufactured is a lot. So a true block acetate, you should be able to look at it. It's really hard on the surface, which means it doesn't scratch easily. And you should be able to look into it if it's not solid. Even if it is solid, it kind of has some depth to it. If it's polished correctly, you should be able to see your face reflection in it. And then from that on down, you get lower and lower quality and cheaper acetates.
Yeah, and the extruded, that's kind of a newer one from my understanding, right? We didn't see that for a long-standing time in optical, at least.
Well, not in cheap frames, and now they're using it in more expensive frames.
Right. Okay, that makes sense.
You can also save a lot of time shooting temples using extruded or cheaper acetates. I mean, there's
generally softer.
Yeah, it's extruded is softer. It scratches when you look at it. It's usually thin, no more than 4 millimeters, and sometimes they'll skive it down to 3 or 2. And it doesn't really have a lot of vivid color to it. It's kind of dead.
Yeah.
When you compare it.
There's no depth and soul to it, like that car with 10 layers of paint on it from the 60s.
You want your eyeglasses to have soul.
Yes, you do. Speaking of soul in eyeglasses, I don't get to see a lot of these, but the two of you do. Talk to me about JMM. I feel like every time I see a post on Nobody Asked the Lab Guy, it's a JMM frame. You must see a ton of them.
Oh yeah, we have a lot of JMMs. We love those. I mean, they have, since they've started, they have kind of a more diverse collection now. Their metals are really amazing. But in terms of acetates, they use 13 millimeter block. The upshot of that is that it's hella thick and chunky and amazing like that. And I love them. The downside of 13 millimeter block is you can't put a rivet through it because the rivet will bend. And that,
I'm still working on that problem you gave me, by the way.
Which one?
Do you remember that? You called out Travis and me saying that we need to figure out why we can't get a 13 millimeter rivet.
Oh, yeah, it'll bend.
Oh, yeah.
It'll bend, break.
Mm-hmm.
And you can even mess with the metal content in it. And to my knowledge, no one has solved the right alloy that will go through 13 millimeters, because you'd need a 14 or 15 millimeter rivet to do that. But that's why GMM has plaques on the front instead of rivets. Those aren't functional, but they, that's their thing. They're cool. Good stuff.
It's whether you want that shield there or the exposed head of the heat sunk hinges, right?
Yeah, crystal frame. I mean, I always like when someone will put a real rivet on a crystal frame. I don't like shields, with the exception of the 13 millimeter where it's not, you can't avoid it. But if you put real rivets onto a crystal frame, it distracts from the burned in hinge behind it that you can see. So there's just little things you can do that kick up a frame and make it higher quality. Most lens designers don't, or frame designers don't even, they just don't know.
They don't know what they don't know, like most opticians.
Yeah.
Ooh,
you guys
my
are just...
dog just ran into my door. What'd you say there, Scott?
I said, you guys are laughing and having a good time.
We're trying. We're trying to keep it fun and interesting.
Oh. Well, why are we talking about glasses then? No, just kidding.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, let's talk about one last thing here. At least I've got one last thing on my list. Are we going to see you at Expo this year? The dreaded Expo.
So last year I had New York totally booked, and I don't know if you guys remembered, but all flights were just not happening. And at 3 a.m, I finally found out that my flight wasn't going and there were no other choices. So it was a huge hassle. But if I can get over that this year, I'll go to Expo.
That's
then we'll revisit this live, and then we'll have Zach on remote if he can't make it.
We'll see. We'll see. We're still very much up in the air if I'm going to New York or not. Haven't been to New York yet. I've done West 3 or 4 times now and still just have never made it to East.
West has always been kind of a dud. I mean, I always go to West because it's an hour flight for me, so it's easy. And the only reason I really go to any expo is because there's people I'd like to talk to in person about business stuff.
That's pretty much the only reason I go.
But yeah, New York is kind of a haul for me to do that, but I might go. I mean, I kind of miss it. I haven't missed an expo, and I don't know. This will be a Vision Expo in like number 57 or whatever.
I don't know. You missed West, right? We didn't see you at West.
I was at West.
What?
Wow.
Scott!
I think all of us are a little hurt.
Yeah, whatever. Go get over it.
What, just popped in, popped out, weren't there very long?
I flew in the morning and flew out at night.
Got it. That's fair.
Everybody's saying I want to hang out and eat dinner. It's like, you guys just aren't where I'm at right now. I got 6 hours and I gotta maximize.
That's fair. That's fair. I don't know. We spent a lot of time with Carrie there, so we were hoping to get the 2 of you in the same room together.
I would have never made my flight. It would have been a disaster. It would have been a big old.
True.
You guys always want to have fun times.
We try. We try to keep it interesting. That's for sure. Unlike this, apparently, according to you, Scott. Matt, any final thoughts that you want to put in?
No. I think this has been quite an interesting chat today. So I'm going to keep quiet as I
Well,
don't often do.
He's got a question, so now you got to ask a question.
Yeah, there you go. See, you got one last opportunity here, buddy. One last one.